so far. I've got a big question tonight. Is the government incentivising child trafficking? Dozens of helpless migrant children died in the Channel last year after they were forced into icy waters by their reckless parents. I now fear today that that number, and that of Channel crossings overall, is about to rise exponentially. Labour's new bill, that will apparently smash the gangs, makes it an offence to, quote, endanger another life during perilous sea crossings to the UK. This is the new legislation tabled on Thursday. So basically, anyone who refuses to be rescued by the French because they'd rather be lumped into a British border force or lifeboat vessel faces 5 years in prison. But here's the bombshell caveat. Buried deep on the UK Parliament website, on the Home Office section, is a legal impact assessment of Labour's border security, asylum and immigration bill. On page 10 of that document, of the 32-page document, it reveals parents who bring their children on the type of journeys that the endangerment offence captures will be excluded from prosecution in almost all circumstances. It says prosecuting parents would breach Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, our old friend, the ECHR, which, of course, protects the right to a family life. It's 6 months into their reign, but I reckon this is potentially the most fatal and reckless piece of legislation Labour has come up with yet. In black and white. Let's see it again. There, you have it on the screen now. If you have a child with you on board your migrant vessel in the English Channel, you're almost certainly immune from prosecution. So what's the point of any of it then? Because most of the people crossing the Channel simply throw their passports and mobile phones into the water on the way to Britain, and dare I say it, they're probably not the most trustworthy people. As the Times reported today, Home Office officials said they're increasingly seeing tactics such as migrants holding children over the side of boats and threatening to drop them in water in order to dissuade rescue attempts or other migrants accepting offers of assistance. So what's to stop any of them bringing any old child along for the ride, knowing they'll be guaranteed a new life in the land of milk and honey when they arrive? We don't know who they are. We don't know where they're from, what their intentions are. How do we even know the child with them is theirs? How do we know they haven't bought the little boy or girl from some disgusting child trafficking ring? And may I suggest it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that this will most likely see a surge in children being exploited by human traffickers as a get-out-of-jail-free card for people who want to move here. And by the way, convicted criminals are separated from their children all the time in the UK. Is it only illegal Channel migrants who have the right to a family life? I'm allowed to, I guess, go down the supermarket tonight, am I, and swipe a load of booze off the shelf so long as I have my child with me? Parents who drag their children across one of the most dangerous shipping lanes in the world on flimsy dinghies shouldn't be immune from prosecution. It should be the complete opposite. They should be charged with extra crimes of endangering helpless kids. It's my take that Labour's entire approach to stopping the boats with this bill is already a total flop. Even their own MPs agree.
Do you have any confidence these measures will change things?
Sadly, I don't. I wish they would, because my constituents are really angry about this. We don't know who's coming in. It's nearly all young men. They're paying a lot of money. They're sometimes putting children in the boat and putting children's lives at risk. But I don't believe it will work. If counter-terrorism legislation worked to deal with gangs, we wouldn't have gangs in Manchester, Liverpool, London. There are gangs all over the country, let alone trying to stop them in another country, in France.
And whilst we're pretty much giving the green light to child trafficking, President Donald Trump's administration in the US is getting serious.
3,500 arrests ICE has made so far since President Trump came back into office. Can you just tell us the numbers? How many have a criminal record versus those who are just in the country illegally?
All of them, because they illegally broke our nation's laws and therefore they are criminals as far as this administration goes. I know the last administration didn't see it that way, so it's a big culture shift in our nation to view someone who breaks our immigration laws as a criminal, but that's exactly what they are. If they broke our nation's laws, yes, they are a criminal.
Everyone's a criminal because you've broken in illegally. Why is that so controversial? Meanwhile, the president is turning the screw further.
Today, I'm also signing an executive order to instruct the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security to begin preparing the 30,000-person migrant facility at Guantanamo Bay. Most people don't even know about it. We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people.
The small boats invasion will only stop when our political leaders get serious. Until then, I'm afraid the bodies will continue to mount. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Author and academic Dr. Lisa McKenzie, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. Good evening to you three. Thank you for your company on this glorious Saturday night. Peter, I'll start with you. What were your thoughts when you saw this? I'm going to call it a pretty chilling revelation today. Basically, as far as I'm concerned, it's the green light for anybody to grab any child they want from wherever they can across the continent or beyond and come to Britain because you're just not going to be prosecuted.
Well, I think you're succumbing to a bit of hyperbole. So first of all, left, right or centre, we all accept what's going on is horrifying. Any man, woman or child putting their life at risk to cross the channel, that's a very horrific and traumatic thing, and we want to stop that. And there's obviously an incredibly tense debate about how we do that. I also think blanket assumptions are not your friend. And we've got, there are some people that do exploit the system, but there are also refugees, people escaping war, people who've been victims of sexual violence, people who've suffered from trafficking, and so on and so on. I think your monologue really lacked any nuance when you address that. And then finally, you kept using this phrase, bombshell, but I agree that the wording of the impact assessment, which is drafted by civil servants, not by politicians, is a concern, but decisions on charging, i.e. who actually goes through the court, are made by the independent CPS, not by politicians. And if it's a bombshell, as you believe, then why is it only on page 12 of the Times with 6 paragraphs? Why is it not on the front page of anywhere?
Well, because they want to hide it.
The Times isn't hiding anything.
The line about kids, parents with their children not being prosecuted is buried on page 12 of a Home Office legal impact statement.
No, I'm not talking about that. I said, why is it on page 12 of the Times? If you think it's a bombshell, the editor of the Times, which is a right-leaning newspaper, said it's not a bombshell.
Can I just say something? What people in London think is not always the same as what the rest of the country thinks. So, the fact that the Times has put it on at the back of the page doesn't mean that the rest of the country is not thinking about this and debating it and talking about it. We have to remember that who is the Times, who's the editors of the Times, who's always in the media, who's always works in Whitehall. It is London-centric people.
I was a journalist in Leeds and in Carlisle.
I live in Nottinghamshire, and I'm telling you now that people are very concerned about this issue.
Linda, sorry to interject, Lisa. Linda, I'm about to bring you in 1 second. But first of all, Peter, let me just get this clear. Do you think this kind of message, or what kind of message, rather, do you think this sends to people risking their lives in the Channel? And not just their own lives. This is the big caveat. I keep saying the lives of vulnerable children who have no choice in this. What kind of message do you think that sends them? Come along, one and all, you won't be prosecuted.
Well, it certainly doesn't send that message. Again, anyone...
You agree it does send that message?
No. But look, you've got to contain your own umbrage a bit and let other people give answers. Any man, woman or child...
You've just spoken for 2 minutes.
Or give me 10 seconds. Any man, woman or child dying in the Channel is obviously a tragedy and horrific. But you suggest that it gives a carte blanche message, and it doesn't at all, because, as you said, it's not an exemption, and if you commit a crime, you can still be prosecuted for it, regardless of having children.
Linda?
I think it's undoubtedly true that some asylum seekers will abuse this clause. Some of them will. Now, I've said this before, Ben, that for most of my life I've been a journalist, but for a year I did 2 6-month projects with evacuees, not refugees, evacuees, but I inevitably met asylum seekers. And I was told conclusively they will take any risk, they will use anything. This is one-to-one conversation with asylum seekers. It's not something I've read or I've heard it third hand. They will take any risk, they will employ any means to get into this country. That's what they told me, because at the time I wasn't a journalist, I was actually facilitating them getting out of bridging hotels and into accommodation. And they were quite open, they were quite clear about this. Now, I'm not suggesting it's hundreds and hundreds.
It sounds like a blanket assumption.
Yeah, I think I've got the merit of having a first-hand conversation with the asylum seekers, which is fairly unusual.
Well, I have that as well.
I don't think it's a blanket assumption, because if you listen to the start of my conversation, I said it's undoubted that some people will abuse this clause. Not all of them, but some of them will. And one of the things you do know, and I've worked for charities as a volunteer for probably about 25 years, children get abused in conflict situations. That's the truth. And it's just one way that this can happen, and it's a loophole we need to close up Probably.
Peter, let me give you some figures. Last year, around, I think it was 74 people died crossing the Channel. A third of those were children. You say they're fleeing war, but the reality is they're in France. They're in Calais. What war was going on in France? Can you enlighten me?
Some are clearly fleeing war, and I think it'd be daft...
What, in France? I'm talking about Calais. What war's going on in France?
Why not? Let me try and answer once without being...
That, then I'll let you...
That's a schoolboy question. We all know there isn't a war in France, but alternatively, let me try something new. Do you think every asylum seeker should end up in France?
I don't care where they end up.
No, answer the question, please. Do you think every asylum seeker, everyone escaping war, should end up in France, paid for by the French government?
There are many safe countries before France. Many of these people have come from Sudan, in Africa. They've travelled through many countries before they get even...
Exactly. Sudan's at war. Exactly. Sudan's a war zone.
So why is it our problem? How many miles away is Sudan?
It's a European problem.
Right. How
many
safe countries have they traipsed through to get to Britain? The last country they were in before coming to Britain was France. So they're not fleeing war, they fled war, and they've passed through many countries since.
But the logical conclusion of that is that everyone has to stop in France, and that France alone has to pay for the entire responsibility.
I don't care. Maybe they should secure their borders.
Can I just sort of bring it back to the legislation? Because what the legislation's doing is it's sort of trying to send out yet another deterrent about crossing on the small boats. So it's saying that people who endanger life will be given 5 years in prison. Well, that is no deterrent at all. Because the people that are coming, if they are desperate to come here, 5 years in prison is not...
It means nothing.
It means nothing.
And they told me...
Can I just say something about the children? I mean, 2 years ago, I think there was a little girl who was 6 who was being brought across with her parents. I have no problem having children, having refugee children in this country. Absolutely none at all. The father of the little girl who died said that they had bought these tickets from the smugglers and they thought there was going to be about 30 people on the boat. And actually, when they got on the boat, about 100 men jumped on and the little girl was crushed.
That's what happens. Many of them are crushed by these...
So I'm not so sure it's always the parents'
Got to move on, unfortunately, Linda. That's what happens... Sorry, go on, quickly.
Well, very quickly, the asylum seekers that I spoke to told me that where any risk is concerned, they price it into the equation. Doesn't matter what you come up with, they add it into their estimation of the difficulty.
These are the kinds of people we're welcoming into Britain at these asylum hotels, happy to crush kids in dinghies in the Channel. There we go. And also, they say they'll get 5 years in prison. No, they won't. They'll be put in a hotel, get given a free mobile phone, Home Office spending money on an Aspen card. Anyway, thank you, panel. Good debate to kick off the show.